there, welcome to HR Shop Talk. I'm your host, Andrea Adams. This show delves into the details of HR through conversations with smart, experienced professionals who are out there doing the work. You can also find me on YouTube, where you can talk to me or others like yourself. Today, my guest is David Simmonds. David might be the metrics guy. If he isn't, he's pretty close. He takes the ISO HCM standards and audits companies. He's also the chairman of HCM Metrics and doing a PhD right now on evidence-based HR. Hi, David. How are you?
I'm fantastic. What an introduction. I didn't recognize myself.
Oh, yeah. I need to learn to write those kinds of introductions myself, about myself, I mean, the ones where I don't recognize myself. But then I feel weird. Okay. All right. So, David, we all know we need metrics, like I said in the introduction, but remind us why. What's the role they play?
Well, do you know, Andrea, for years, those of us in HR, we've been around a few years and we've said, I want a seat on the board. We knock on the C-suite, give me a seat on the board. But we don't realize that in the boardroom, in the C-suite, they speak a different language. Our colleagues in marketing and finance and IT, they talk about graphs and charts, spreadsheets and numbers. Now, with the best will in the world, most people in HR are lovely, lovely people, but they don't do numbers.
All right.
And to get your hand on the door of the C-suite, you've got to embrace the metrics. You've got to embrace the data. I started in this a few years ago because I was fascinated by big data. And you know how you go into a supermarket and you have the swipe card and you think, yeah, points me prizes. Not so much. What that loyalty card does, it tells the shop owner what you've just bought and what you're going to buy next week. And then they add on information about the weather. They add on the price of the dollar. Or if there's a Middle Eastern war, that's big data. And we can apply that to HR now so that metrics and data and analytics and dashboards help us to embrace this vast sea of data and use it for HR strategy.
I see all of these things on a continuum, from the very most basic to some of that, what you were just talking about, like really sophisticated stuff.
Sure.
Can you okay, so that's just how I see it. Am I seeing it accurately? And how do you see the continuum?
Of course. It's not so much a continuum as a complexity.
Okay.
The very basic, easy stuff. Time to hire, cost of hire. That's so easy. The vast majority of big enterprises these days are tapped into SAP or Oracle or Cornerstone or Workday, and most others there's hundreds of little HR information systems. It's so easy to drag down that data, but it's what we do with it that's very important. And then, yes, you're right. At the other end, there's greater and greater complexity. Whether we're looking at leadership or diversity, whether we're looking at succession planning or health and safety. It can get very complex, but it doesn't have to. It's what we do with it that's important. Those of us in HR, we're very good at storytelling. Mm-hmm. So we use the metrics, the data, the analytics, the numbers, the graphs, the spreadsheets, and we say to those that need to know, we say, okay, let me tell you a story about recruitment or retention or turnover. And they start to glaze over, and then you give them the numbers and the charts, and they say, that's what we've been wanting.
But I think some of us in HR, we are trying to give them the numbers. We'll go and we'll make our presentation and we'll dig out some numbers and we'll tell some stories, and it's still landing flat. Why do you think that is?
Because we need to talk their language.
But we're talking numbers, aren't we?
When I go and see an organization and I talk to the chief exec or the HR director, I say, how's business? And they go, brrr. And how's your strategy? Brrr. And I say, and what problems have you got? And they say, no, we've got no problems. I said, what are the difficulties? What are the issues? What are those things you're trying to fix, which you haven't sorted out yet? They say, actually, there is an issue. And we dive deep and we find it's HR and technology. And we bring the two together. So we have to talk the language of the organization. It's not about HR or the metrics. It's about the bottom line. Coming out of COVID, most organizations are changing. I'm not just talking about remote working. They're saying, well, why do we continue to do what we do? Should we outsource? Should we diversify? Should we merge? And those are big questions about the purpose and vision, mission of the organization. And the solution to those is always the people.
Okay. Can I run a hypothetical situation by you? So go into a company and we don't have to do an engagement survey to know that the employees are unhappy. Where would you start with that?
I would do an engagement survey.
Okay.
And engagement surveys these days are quite sophisticated. We're not talking once a year, pencil and paper. I've seen some pulse surveys which can be done in 30 seconds, several times a day. And it's actually, and anonymized, of course, and aggregated, definitely. But it's actually finding out where people are at. Mm-hmm. And I'm not talking about silly things about ping pong tables or Friday afternoons, silliness. I am talking about organizational culture. And there's a lot of toxic managers out there. And what COVID did was give people permission to say, okay, I've had enough. That was the great resignation. And so people are now taking responsibility for their work, working remotely or hybrid. Productivity has stayed the same or gone up. And people are taking much more responsibility for outcomes and not inputs. I think the days of the old supervisor, manager, team leader who said, if I can't see you, I can't trust you, that's being questioned. Yes. So there's much more trust, much more accountability, and people are taking responsibility for themselves and their work.
If we go back to that engagement example, and HR, I'm going to do my metrics. I'm going to do my engagement survey, and I'm going to go stand in front of, senior management, and I'm going to say engagement is poor. Our only 7 out of 10 would promote us with, potential employees, and you get a very blank stare from management. Sure. What's going wrong there?
Because you're still talking HR.
Okay. Now tell me about that.
Instead, we need to think of what the finance director needs, the VP of production needs to hear. We need to talk about outcomes and outputs and productivity. And so the measure is not how happy are you, but are you meeting your targets? Has staff turnover stayed the same or been reduced?
Okay.
And are people buying into the vision and mission of the organization by showing you that they're not leaving?
This is a strange question given our conversation, but what are metrics good for, and when does their utility fade? Does their utility ever fade, or is it just how we apply it?
If you can envisage a pyramid, at the bottom of the metrics, the data, basic numbers, basic letters, basic words, it's just stuff.
Yep.
On top of that, there's information.
Okay.
And information is different from data because it's meaning that I attribute to it.
Okay.
So if I say a glass, it's absolutely classic. Is the glass half empty or half full? Well, it's neither. It's just 50%. 50% is the data. It's the meaning you attach to it, which is the information.
Okay.
On top of that is knowledge. And knowledge is information applied in a context.
Okay.
And we all do it differently. And finally, on top, there needs to be wisdom, which is an overarching ethical, moral framework. Answers the question why. So to answer your question, is it ever out of date? Well, the answer is no, because it is true at a particular point in time. It's a snapshot.
Yeah.
It is true in relation to what happened yesterday or last year. And it's still true in relation to what happens tomorrow and next year, because then you get benchmarking, you get time analysis. It's also true in relation to other benchmarks in the company, in other countries, and in other industries. So it doesn't actually go out of date, but it always needs to be kept up to date. And the way you do that is to actually embrace the power of AI and machine learning within the platform that you happen to be using.
I mean, there's just so much data, so much metrics. We can't track and keep track of everything. How do you decide what you're going to keep track of?
Some of the big platforms that I've mentioned track over 480 different metrics.
Right.
And yet they're still not good enough because they don't look at the qualitative stuff. We need quantitative and qualitative in balance. And the ones that I would choose are the 60 metrics that are in the international standard, which cover the whole of HR. And they're there and they're standard for all organizations in all countries, in all cultures. And they cover the whole sweep of the 11 broad areas of HR, like leadership and recruitment and staff turnover and succession planning and health and safety and diversity. It's all covered with 60 basic metrics.
Okay. I will get a link to those from you afterwards and put them in the show notes.
Oh.
Okay. Can you explain the difference between metrics reporting, dashboards, and analytics?
Sure. I mean, metrics are the basic data.
Yeah.
The analytics is what you do with them, how you crunch the numbers.
Okay.
Dashboard is a visualization of that on your computer, which will tell you real time how many people are leaving, how many women you've got, how many Black people you've got, what's happening with the succession plan of the VPs who are going to be leaving in the next 5 years. And that's real-time dashboard, which shows information from the analysis of the metrics.
Okay. Is there anything, metrics, reporting, dashboards, analytics, is there any missing? Like, is there anything I'm missing in that?
Well, this whole space is being changed, upgraded, developed all the time. Last week, I was in Berlin at the global annual conference where we're seeking to develop and improve the standards for HR reporting.
Okay.
And people were saying that we need seriously to look at engagement, not in the way that we discussed a few minutes ago, but to actually get some real-time data and metrics on analytics. And it's kind of there, but it's indirect, because in the current suite, people are looking at organizational culture, for example, or they look at it indirectly in terms of how many people are leaving. Whereas I think that's an area that needs to be improved. Personally, if you ask me, I would say we also need to go further in terms of communication. I'm not talking about Big Brother looking at all your keystrokes and where you send your emails and who you interact with. All the organization network analysis stuff I can believe is a bit dangerous, but certainly communications and how we communicate, particularly in a hybrid environment, I think that needs upgrading and developing.
I feel like I've gone 5 ways from center asking you this question, but so often our HR's efforts at numbers, at metrics, at all of this stuff just lands flat. What are we doing wrong?
We have to start with the issue. Where's it hurting? What's the problem? And then people will be at least part of the solution. And that's when you start to use the numbers to track what's happening and why and where and when and how much. So start with the issue, start with the problem, start with where it hurts, and then come at it. It's a solution-based rather than problem-based approach. Okay. So we're looking at people, and therefore we can delineate that because now we can actually measure the ROI of HR.
Okay.
You use the numbers within a story to help solve the problem which is owned by the organization.
So far, we're kind of talking about metrics, we're talking about analytics. I get the sense that HR, we almost have hardly wrapped I see metrics as very basic. It's the data, but we have hardly wrapped our heads around metrics yet in HR. And now we have to also move on to analytics. I've even made presentations about this, and I get a bit of deer in the headlights kind of looking at me. How do we approach that in HR? How do we get a handle on this?
Sure. I think the important thing is that those of us who've been in HR for a long time and are good at it should not necessarily become data analysts. We need to recruit and employ specialist technicians and engineers to do that stuff and to use the HR information system, the platform that we're using. And we need to start with a story, we need to start with a problem, and then we need to say to the technician, the specialist, the engineers, you need to say, okay, show me what employee retention has been amongst our middle managers in our home office and our warehouses every June for the last 5 years. And that is easy.
It is easy.
And then we say, okay, what is the age structure of that group for the next 5 years? Is it, there's a problem because many of them are coming up to retirement? Or that particular demographic are wanting promotion because they're having bigger families and they need more money to provide for them, or whatever it happens to be. And we can therefore predict, it's not just reporting, we can predict what is likely to happen next year. And on that basis, we can, for example, increasingly, people are not talking about exit interviews, but staying interviews. So we need to invest quality time and resources in the people we want to keep. Now, we do need to let some people go. That's churn, that's natural, that's great, that's wonderful. But some people who are making a great contribution to the organization, and we can find out who they are, they're the people that we need to resource and develop and keep and improve.
I know we can find out who they are by just asking people who are our top performers, and people will tell you. Is there a way to tell through the data who our top performers are?
Absolutely. And well, the people who are making a greatest contribution may not necessarily be top performers because it depends on how much resource they're using. So it's those who are making a bottom line contribution that we need to hold on to. Sometimes they're a little quieter than the top performers, but that's very, very, very easy to find out with the numbers.
How? Like, you've got your soft skill HR people, let's say, you've got some, amazing soft HR people. How would we ever find out through the numbers that HR person is a top performer?
It depends what they're looking at. Let's take a different example. Let's look at grievance and disciplinary.
Okay.
Employee relations. How do you measure that? Well, you measure it by the number of cases, and you measure it by what kind of people were involved and what were the outcomes. But more importantly, what happened afterwards? Did it continue? Was it because of a particular manager? What development programs did you institute? And therefore, what was the return on investment? It's not just counting up how many. So with diversity, it's not about how many women or Black people or disabled people. It's how are you enabling a diverse proportion of people to be included and motivated and improved and developed and promoted so that those people can be actually on the recruitment panel. And that's what changes. So it's not the numbers per se. It's what we do with it, how we implement change.
Okay. I'm going to have to leave it there.
Thank you so much.
I'm gonna so much to think about. Well, thanks, David. That was so great. I've seen in my own practice just how important metrics are to gaining access and credibility at that C level. Thanks for listening out there, and we'll catch you next time when I talk shop with another insightful guest.